Welcome to Fully Exposed, a podcast that explores the taboo and unconventional in an attempt to educate your ass. I'm your host, Jessica Beuker. Let's get started. Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to a brand new episode of Fully Exposed. I'm about to chat with our very special guest, Karleen Pendleton Jimenez. Welcome, Karleen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Karleen is a director and a writer for both print and screen. She recently released the trailer for an animated short based off of her 2011 book of the same name, How to Get a Girl Pregnant. So why don't you start by telling our listeners a little bit more about yourself, Karleen?
I live in Toronto. I'm a writer. I'm also a professor in education, gender, women's studies at Trent University. I'm a mother, spoiler alert on the book, and stepmother, and a butch, and a dyke. And that's you. That's a lot. That's
So many of the themes that run through your impressive body of work have to do with gender and identity, specifically, obviously, with your own experiences as a butch-identified queer woman. Can you talk a little bit about those identity experiences while you were growing up?
Okay, sure. So I didn't know anything about gay stuff, but what I did know from a very young age was that I was really boyish, and the family joke was that I just spit and screamed and yelled if anybody tried to put a dress on me or feminine clothing on me from the time I was about 3 years old. And now, having seen 3-year-olds, I guess I just thought it was a family joke, but when you see 3-year-olds, they're pretty adamant about what they need to wear, pretty definite about the kind of gender expression and gender experimentation they want to do. So, so I knew very much about being odd in that way. Especially by the time I hit puberty, there was a lot of pressure to try to be more of a girl, and so I bought a soft pink sweater because I thought that would fix it, because that's what my brother told me. And that it didn't really work out. I would just look like a little butch walking around, strutting around with a pink sweater, which I think just made people think it was more hilarious. But I have to say, there's a lot of privilege that comes with masculinity as well. And so on the one hand, where I did get a lot of comments about not performing my gender correctly. On the other hand, I was running with the boys, playing sports, loving the competition at school, really thriving at school, and just really enjoying my life in a lot of ways, So in ways I think that, even if I had been a more feminine girl, I wouldn't have had access to. So it was a really mixed bag. I kept thinking if I could look more like a girl, even I went to a high school in a different community, so I thought, oh, this is my chance. I could just buy all girls' clothes and nobody will know that I'm not doing it right. And I did. I tried to do that, but it was a complete failure. And later I learned they had the new high school. They had not a contest, a game to figure out what gender I was. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty. And I think it was worse too because it wasn't my community.
Mm-hmm.
People knew me and my family, and maybe I was odd, but, everybody knew me growing up. But when you're thrown into a new community, nobody has any reason to have any loyalty to you. So that was really difficult. But what got really better was when I went to university. I went to Berkeley in San Francisco area, full of lesbians everywhere, and I didn't know what they were. Like I said, I thought they were insults, but I found them and they found me pretty quickly. And I would say within the lesbian community, not all lesbian communities, but the one I found myself in, it was a real privilege to be boyish. Like the boyish lesbians got the girls, like it was pretty exciting, pretty fun. And so all the reasons that I was kind of picked at when I was younger turned around and became the reasons people liked me, so, and were attracted to me. So that was great. You kind of go from being this totally unattractive heterosexual girl to this very attractive, handsome dyke. I was like, wow, how did that happen in my life? That was fantastic.
Interesting transition for sure. So gender socialization starts, before we're even born. It's ingrained and very rigid when we're young, but I feel like it only becomes kind of more so as we age, or maybe we just become more aware of it. You talked about how this structure impacted you when you were young and growing up. I'm wondering if it still has an impact on you today, and if so, in what ways? Because I imagine it'd be kind of different obstacles than you would be facing when you're a child.
Yeah, I would say at this age, given that I have a good job, I think one of the big obstacles is employment. That's what I see a lot of butches, if there's trouble, or other trans guys or trans women, it's a lot of people don't want to hire us, but because I managed to get a good job about a dozen years ago, it's a, there's not a lot of obstacles. Because that's a big obstacle. And I also found a woman that really likes butches and isn't ashamed of that. Sometimes you could find lovers that, they want to sleep with you, but they don't want to be seen with you the next day. But, luckily that's been a long time since I've had to deal with that. I would say, one thing that can be hard is at this point in my life is with my kids or my stepkids, especially my stepkids when they were younger. I couldn't, if I just went to even pick them up at school, the other kids would stare at me and start to ask my kids questions. And that was very difficult because I'm very proud. I'm very out. It would seem ridiculous to be otherwise. But, that's not my kid's life, right? So They don't have to be out. They need to survive school. They need to do what they want. And so, when you just even go to pick them up and you're potentially outing them and subjecting them to criticism or harassment just by the simple task of walking into the school, that's pretty hard. That can be hard.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's probably the only part in my life, where it can affect me. Otherwise, you just get a lot of misters, a lot of times, or, they'll say, sir, oh, madam, ma'am, or that kind of thing. But I don't mind it. I felt like as a kid, so many times people asked me my gender that by the time I grew up, I was like, what do you see? I'll be the gender that you see. It's fine. Because sometimes I feel like a guy and sometimes I feel like a woman. So, why can't they see me as either or both? And I know a lot of people, the pronouns are very important. But for me, I just rather people use the pronoun that they see. And I kind of like that I'm in between, that I'm both in between, and that I can, I don't have to be one. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind of continuing on with this, I guess, theme of childhood, it feels to me anyway, like gender roles are taught at a very early age, which is obviously a crucial stage. And then as we get older, and especially in today's climate where things are more open and more openly fluid than they've ever been before, we start to do the work to rewire our brains and our ways of thinking as we get older. In a way, being an adult almost feels like a lot of unlearning things that you were taught as a child. Do you believe that there are some ways that we can reverse this process so that we have kind of the education and the tools when our brains are actually developing? And how can we I guess, kind of teach children to be having these conversations? Because I'd imagine that there's a lot of, parents and educators that feel comfortable, talking about this, which they shouldn't, but that's kind of just the reality.
Yeah, actually, in my other hat, one of the things I did was I went and did creative writing with about probably around 600 kids
Oh, wow.
in a region near Toronto, I will say, but in quite a rural region as well, and just got them sharing stories about gender. I think, how can we rewire it? Well, one thing that's very exciting is, like, like no other time right now, there is very much a movement of parents and gender independent or gender creative kids. There's different words that they're using that
Mm-hmm.
are really demanding that the schools need to change, and they're demanding to use the names they want to use the pronouns, to use the bathrooms in a way that really did not exist before as a collective effort. So
Right.
I think that's very hopeful and very exciting. And you see that across Canada and the US. And I'm not saying, even in the research I did, I'm not saying that there aren't still tons of problems. But I think those efforts will really help. Going into teacher education programs where we're training teachers and making sure that they're learning about the kids' lives who, maybe they want to identify with a pronoun, maybe they want to use they as their pronoun, maybe they are, identify as gender fluid or gender queer and they don't want pronouns at all. Like, there's just many more possibilities for gender that a lot of kids are having access to. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be too optimistic because what I found when I did my research was that um, it wasn't just queer kids that were being targeted. It was like everybody was being told. Maybe they weren't being targeted in a particularly violent way, but everybody in one way or another was being told that they were performing their gender incorrectly. And
Mm-hmm.
if the girls were too feminine, then that was wrong. They were showing off. If they were too masculine, then they were like, dykes. If the boys, tried anything that was like dancing or singing or the color pink or anything, they were being told not to do it. So, there's still this high level of surveillance against kids' genders. But that, it's not one story or the other. It's kind of both are happening together.
Yeah. Moving on to, I guess, the pregnancy part of this conversation. When did you first know that you wanted to have a child?
You know what? Can I say one more thing with the
Yeah,
kid piece?
absolutely.
Well, with the kid piece, I do want to say that the reason I ended up, because the other book I have that's big is a children's book, and it's called Are You a Boy or a Girl? And it was a lot about my experiences of being this kid and being kind of teased. But the reason I wrote that book, in addition to having those experiences, was because I was in my 20s, I was volunteering in a kindergarten class. And what I realized was that those kids were very engaged in having conversations about gender. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted to know, they go, you have short hair, so are you a boy or a girl? And I said, so you must be a boy. And I realized that they were very pleased to be having these conversations. So I think that's also hopeful, whereas adults might, as you say, they need to do unlearning, or they might get nervous or shut down around these conversations. If people are willing to go talk to the kids, they would love to have these conversations because they love researching gender. Anyway, I just want to say that about the kids, and because when you talk about what can you do with the kids, I think you could go and listen to them and talk to them.
Yeah. Just to go off of what you were saying, that's kind of one thing that I notice generally too is kids seem to be very open in terms of their curiosity about just the world around them. And that's why, it almost makes the most sense to be having these quote unquote adult conversations with children, because, this is kind of the time when they're most open. They don't have any, prejudices or anything against anyone. They're like a blank slate, and they just want to learn, and they just want to ask questions and know more. And so it's kind of ironic that we don't have those types of conversations with kids earlier, for sure.
Yeah, and I would say, sometimes they can say horrible things. Don't get me wrong; they're not necessarily nice, but they're incredibly
sure.
honest. And that's the very thing that, the sex ed curriculum was trying to open up those conversations. And I think I've heard that they've made that an election issue of trying to shut down those conversations, which I think is really stupid. But anyway.
Yeah. Giant step backwards, for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't go that way. So.
But yes, when did you first know that you yourself wanted to be a parent, wanted to have a child?
Actually, I wrote about this in the book. I don't know if I thought of it explicitly until I was about 18 or 19, and my mom was worried that I was going to be a lesbian, I think, but she didn't ask me that because that was still taboo. So instead, the way she asked me was whether or not I wanted to have a baby. And, like I said, I think she was actually asking about my sexuality, but because the word she used was about baby, I didn't even give it a second thought. I said, oh yeah, I definitely want to have a baby. And, so and I guess from that point, I decided, yes, this is a fact of my life. Of course I want to have a baby. And, I said, but I can't do it yet. I haven't finished school or anything. I don't have any money. And she wasn't expecting me to. So ironically, a question about sexuality became the clarity for being a parent.
Were you aware at the time or when you had this clarity that you would likely have to go about it in a different way than we're used to seeing, in movies and television and in our very heteronormative culture?
Yeah, I was, because I figured out by that point that I was a lesbian. So I knew it wouldn't be so easy. And, it was when I was 22, maybe 2 or 3 years later, that my teacher, who was a lesbian, had a baby, and she was a butch, and that made it seem very possible to me as well. Okay, she did that, so I could do that. So, I know sometimes people think role models are passé or whatever, but I think they've had a profound influence on my life,
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this is something that I can do. And she had asked a friend for sperm, a gay male friend. So I thought, that's okay. That's how you do it. I can do this. And I just would listen anytime if lesbians talked about having sperm, like accessing sperm. And, after that, like for the next 10, 15 years, I would just listen very closely to how they managed to pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think from that time I just thought, okay, I'll find a gay friend and I'll ask him for sperm and then it'll work.
So let's talk about the memoir turned animated short. How to Get a Girl Pregnant chronicles your experiences with just that, trying to get pregnant. For those who aren't familiar with the book, can you bring some of the experiences in it to life for us right now?
Sure. Well, I tried about anything I could think of to have a baby. I did go originally from that idea of, I'm going to ask a friend, and I'm going to ask my ideal friend, and I'm going to ask somebody who's also Mexican, so that my baby could be mixed Mexican and white, because I'm Mexican and white. he was Mexican and white. I thought, okay, that's perfect too. And he was smart and beautiful. And I just really, it's almost like your perfect lover. I was creating like my perfect sperm donor, and I romanticized him and made him, the ideal man. And then that didn't work out. So, that had been my plan, as I said, for years, for a decade or so. So when that didn't work out, it really sent me on a chaotic adventure of figuring out how to access sperm, but also really questioning what I valued in another human being and what I would value in a child, and that I hadn't thought about. Like it can make you seem very superficial. Like, oh well, does the kid have to be good looking? Does the kid have to be smart? Do genetics mean smartness? Does the kid have to be tough? Do they have to be Mexican? I kind of struggled with all of those issues, and I don't want to spoil the book, but I went to fertility clinics. I asked friends. I went to bars to pick up guys. I tried I tried everything I could to have the baby. I just felt like I needed it. I needed to have a baby, and I didn't want to give up. The other thing I would say about the book is that, when I said earlier that I would listen to any stories I could find about how lesbians had babies, the other thing I did was I picked up any books I could find or any information. And what I found was that, I was very thankful for the information, don't get me wrong, but it seemed very medical, and it seemed boring. It didn't seem sexy. And I thought, are you kidding me? So if you're gay, you can't be sexy when you want to have a baby? Like, if you can't be sexy when you want to have a baby, when can you be sexy, right? That seemed unfair to me. So also part of what I wanted to do in the book was make it's painful, it's medical, it's, honest, it's all these things, but it's also funny and sexy, and messy. And I wanted that story to be out there as well, so that, so that lesbians would have access to the adventure version of this, of this quest.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's more authentic and genuine to kind of hear it through the eyes of somebody who's gone through that process, rather than, you're right, a lot of stuff that surrounds fertility and pregnancy in terms of research and tools that are already out there is very, very medical, which can be a little off-putting, and it makes it seem very complicated, which of course it is and can be, but it's just, I think, harder for people to maybe understand when it's all through that kind of medical lens rather than through the eyes of a person who's actually going through the process.
Yeah. And I think part of that is trying not to succumb to becoming the object, to be impregnated, but to try to keep some humanity in the middle of it, which can be very difficult, when you're being probed and examined and blood removed and, all this stuff, right? It's hard to remember that you have any agency and that you can, one of the ways when I did go to the fertility clinics, and they were great, by the way, even though that chapter is very difficult, it's difficult because it's difficult, not because the people weren't really great. But one of the ways I would just do it was just by admiring how beautiful the doctor was or the nurse was. And I was like, I got to retain something of myself here, something of my libido, something of my heart, and not become this medical object. The other thing I would say too is, even though it's a lesbian story, tons of straight women have so many straight women have come and talked to me after the book, because really, I mean, the bulk of people trying to get pregnant are straight women. And I thought, well, they got the access to the sperm, what do they care about my book? But actually, so many women told me, oh, I really want to get pregnant, but my boyfriend's not ready, and so I'm hoping if we go to therapy. And I think, oh my God, they'd be 39 or 40 or 41, and I hardly knew anything about my body, but I knew that your chances went down. Like, you got to just go and get pregnant. So even the heterosexual women are like, they can't get the guys to give them any sperm. So it's a mess.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was really interesting that you mentioned was the act of actually like choosing a sperm donor. Because I never really thought about it before, is that, if somebody in a heterosexual relationship just kind of, gets pregnant and maybe it's not planned. It's a little bit like a roll of the dice. You have a kid and you love the kid kind of no matter what. There's not a lot of time to have that kind of input. And so it was interesting to hear you talk about how it's a lot more, I guess, transactional in the sense that you really do actually start to think, what are the things that I value in a child, which is I think an interesting question to really be faced with.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it borders on creepy, because because I think these decisions are being made in heterosexual relationships, but they're maybe not so explicit, They're not so categorized. They're, you fall for someone, you desire someone, different things happen and you get there. But one of the I don't know what you'd call it, perspectives that my girlfriend and I would always joke about, or still joke about, is a kind of point system where you're maybe secretly or unconsciously thinking, well, who can I get, like, even if you're in a bar, who can I get? Like, how many points do people think I have? And how many points do I think they have? And you're wagering. You're like, do I have youth? Do I have, age, beauty, job? Like, how can I get someone, right? And then that, and then that also goes further to, who do I want to get for my child? I mean, at one point we were looking, there's very, this, I don't know if things have changed. There are very few Latino sperm donors when I was looking that we had access to in Canada. And so there was basically a tall Latino and a short Latino. And otherwise, like, most guys were white with maybe like a couple black guys and a couple Asian guys, and that was it. And there was like, we called it like the tall Latino and the short Latino. And then you think, okay, well, that's basically what I've got. And then, and then you just, you look at statistics and they say people who are taller make a lot more money, Oh my God, I'm deciding my kid's future salary, like, this is crazy. One identified as a mestizo and one identified as a Hispanic. And mestizo is just much better politics. So I was like, oh, I got to go for the mestizo. My kid will have good politics, So, or and when I say the point system, when I went to the bar in Vancouver to get a guy, I found this guy. I thought he was handsome, so he got looks points. And then he was older than me, so I thought, well, maybe I'll get youth points because I know I look like a big lesbian. So what was funny to me at the end was, like, because I didn't know why he ended up going home with me, and then, or to the hotel with me, and then he says at the end, like, you're a professor. Oh my God, I got professor. I had no idea why. I thought, he's going to know I'm a big lesbian. He's going to think, what the hell is going on here? But the professor thing overrode it. So even for him, he's like, he's judging.
Yeah, I mean, we're all, I guess, kind of doing that on some level
Yeah,
whenever we have any type of social interactions. It's interesting of looking at it in a point system. It seems very, silly and superficial, but it's that, there's the truth level to it, is that we've all done that. Our minds have all worked in those kind of, scanning up and down judgmental kind of ways when we're choosing, a partner, a friend, anything really.
exactly. Yeah, and I think that was a bit hard to write because I wanted to be honest, but I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to write the book to hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I tried to just be as honest as possible without being too much of a jerk.
What was the most shocking thing that you learned about yourself, or about the system, during this entire fertility process?
Oh, huh. I just came to mind how quickly they basically ask you to go on drugs.
Hmm.
Um, one, if you don't have a baby. I think I didn't have a baby after 2 inseminations. And I was looking at the numbers as I'm kind of a numbers person. So it was like 20% chance if of getting pregnant on each insemination. So it wasn't the in vitro one, it was just putting it in. And I thought, well, that's not anywhere near 100%. So why would they be offering me the drugs? I
Mm-hmm.
just, the way it was, yeah, the way the drugs came in so quickly. I understand why they do it now because the process is really hard on you.
Yeah.
If you don't if you don't push the person forward quickly, you could just lose them. But
Right.
I was very persistent, and I just wanted to give it a try for a while. I think that was shocking to me. I mean, I guess that's kind of an obscure moment in the whole thing, but um, my girlfriend, would try for when she was with her husband, she tried for a year before she got pregnant, and nobody put pressure on her. They weren't worried. They just had fun, tried,
Yeah.
but there's this whole other circle of pressure. You got to do it quick. You got to get on it. If it's not working, you got to up the ante. Like after a couple tries, it was like, well, you got to try in vitro, which is, I think now there's some coverage for it, but at the time there wasn't. So it was $10,000 a shot. So that
Holy
was
cow.
also shocking. I mean, I was already blowing about 1,000 to 1,500 a shot, and that's like per month, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
still trying to pay off. And then it was like you should take drugs, and then it was like you should do in vitro, which was $10,000 a shot, and it just felt like really bad gambling in Vegas of on the table you would never play at because you don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
And maybe it's 4 in the morning and everything feels like shit. So it was kind of a nightmare in that way. So
I I don't know much about it either. I'm not sure if there is any type of coverage, but it seems to me that I guess it's something that I never considered before, of just how that is another, children again are another heteronormative kind of privilege, because I mean, kids are already super expensive, never mind the costs that you have to undergo just to have said child. So, the fact that isn't something that is necessarily just guaranteed to anybody who wants to be a parent, is something that I get a lot of people probably take for granted.
yeah, for sure. And the other part of this is the other thing that I don't know if I was shocked about it, but I didn't realize is when I first started, like plenty of lesbians, they could just get pregnant at home. They don't, the doctor said, look, you just get a guy and get him to jerk off in a cup and put it inside. Like it's no big deal. Like it's not. It's like gay reproduction has become highly medicalized. And if you think
Hmm.
about it, yeah, it really is that easy. It can be that easy for tons of people. Um, it's, when it doesn't work, that's when it's a big problem. But I find that I had no idea. I thought, you had to go to a doctor. You had to like have some. I don't know why. I just. It's like it's been taken away from us. But many lesbian babies have just been made very like with no money at home. Just
Hmm.
no problem. That's the other side of it. But the side when it doesn't work, I mean, I think they will now pay for two in vitro. I'm not sure, but we should check that. But actually, I'm here in France right now for the year, and in France, it's a big issue because they will not. Not only will they not pay for any procedures for lesbians to get pregnant, they won't perform them. So
Really?
yeah, like France is fairly progressive, but
Hmm.
the irony is in some countries they've legalized gay marriage, which everybody thought was the big thing. But actually, to me, like the reproduction issue is bigger because you know the state could recognize or not recognize the love you have for someone. Okay, great. I'm glad we have gay marriage in Canada because I think it just helps overall. But to tell someone they aren't allowed to reproduce, that's a whole other level of civil rights being lost.
Yeah.
That's really horrible. And that's in some countries where gay marriage is fine. It's the reproduction where as long as gays are not around kids, they can do their thing. We'll be okay, but they can't be involved in kids, and that's really gross. And that's to me like a much bigger humanitarian issue. Um, but luckily in Canada we have both at this point.
Hmm.
So, but
But
the
it's
people in France, they have to if they want to try to have a baby, they go to Spain because Spain will do it.
wow. Yeah, and again there is another cost to incur is to have to travel and to leave your home and just to try to have a baby. I never that's something that I never personally considered is how that's not something that is even accessible in every country. We are very lucky in Canada to have these rights, but that's certainly not the case for everybody. Um, in terms of this knowledge being more accessible and I guess available to those who need it, not just about how to go about it, but about different fertility options. I mean, you talked about how, people can do it at home, but, that was something that you never even really considered because the first thought kind of goes to a doctor's office or something that's medical. So all of this type of information, how do you feel that we can make it more accessible and available?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, there's really great services online, and also I'm not sure where you're located, but in Toronto, there's the Lesbian Gay Parenting Network, what is it? LGBTQ Parenting Network, and
Okay.
they offer classes. Um, what is it? Dykes Planning Tykes as the lesbian one, and I'm not sure the daddies to be, I think, and I mean, they do classes every year. They spread the information really well that way. But as you say, like tons of people still don't have access to that information. I don't know where it can happen. I mean, it would be great if it's definitely online if you look for it. But I would love for that to be in the sex ed curriculum. Since it's
Yeah.
contested, why don't we just make the sex ed curriculum even better than what it is right now, and put that kind of information in health classes so that all the kids graduating from high school have a better sense of their options. And the fertility options, as again I said, like I'm talking about lesbians, but uh, many many others are also in this boat. Many women, like the other thing is single women tell me they want to get pregnant but couldn't find a guy that would be willing, and how would they go about it, and it's a
Yeah.
it's an issue for I think a much larger portion of the population than people even think about.
Right. I think it's just something people need to talk about more, even within, among their friends and their family and in their own communities. I mean, that's how kind of the spread of information works. So to that note, where can people read your book? The animated short that is based off of the book. I've seen the trailer. Is the short in the process of being made still, or is it finished?
It is still in the process. It
Okay.
is nearly done. I would say within a couple months it will be done. I think probably the first move with it is to put it in film festivals across the world, if possible.
Yeah.
Um, the book is. And the other thing about the film is that we're hoping to make a web series. So, that first film is just the pilot. It's about 7 minutes long. We've got a season written up. Yeah, so hopefully at some point, by the end of the year, we could tell you where you could start watching those things. We don't have that information yet, but we do have a website, howtogetaGirlPregnant.com, I think. Is that right? howtogetaGirlPregnant.com. And we have a Facebook page. It's How to Get a Girl Pregnant. So you could subscribe to any of those, and then you would be on our list for receiving notice. In terms of my book, that's pretty available. It's on Amazon. You can buy it through the publisher. It's on Kindle. It's very easy to access.
Awesome. I'm going to make sure that I put all of those links, everything that you basically just mentioned, in the show notes.
Well,
So, of
thank
course,
you.
if anybody, you're welcome. So if anybody is interested in buying the book, reading the book, and learning more about Karleen and this journey, and finding out when the short is going to come out, then all of that information will be in there. One other thing about the short is, how did you, I guess, decide that, first of all, that you wanted to make it? Because, you had already written the book, and now this is a completely different medium, so different way of storytelling. But also, how did you land, I guess, on the fact that you wanted it to be animated? Did that kind of just happen randomly, or was that thought out?
Well, yes, both. First, I would say is, I wrote the book. I wrote it as a book, but even after, even as soon as it was out, I thought, oh, this is. I mean, it has a lot of momentum. It's a page turner. It is episodic. It would fit into the medium of film really well. And at that point, a previous collaborator, the one that transformed my children's book into a cartoon, bought the rights to the film for How to Get a Girl Pregnant, and her medium is animation. And I mean, I hadn't, really thought, oh, this needs to be live action or animation, but it's one of those things where you trust the universe, because I thought, it animation is a very good genre for it, because it's so dreamy. When you're thinking about trying to have a baby, it's a lot of fantasy and dreams, which animation does a very good job of, right?
Totally.
You're not constrained by live action. So I felt like it just really made sense. And it does challenge me, to write something that's worthy of animation. But it's really fun too, because you think, oh, I could do anything. I can make any image. Anything could happen in the film, because we can animate that. So, yeah, so it's pretty cool.
No limits. Well, the trailer looks awesome, and I can't wait to see it when it comes out. Again, we'll also put the trailer in the show notes for those who are interested. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today about this. It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate it, Jess. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in this week to Fully Exposed. I hope your ass has been sufficiently educated.
This has been an Evoke Media podcast.